With the protracted tourism coming to an end way back in 2009, today Sri Lanka is considered one of the most peaceful and beautiful countries in the world. And country is in revival where democratic pluralism, social cohabitation and economic freedom could flourish. This scenario very much paves the way towards attracting more foreign direct investments to the country. And with me here at this edition of Hot Seat on Sri Lanka Live is the Executive Chairman of Premier Asia Capital, Mr. Patrick Lim. Welcome, Mr. Lim.
Thank you very much.
First, we'd like to know what made you invest here in Sri Lanka?
Well, as you know, investors in Asia, we look around globally for areas which have the right investment climate. And it's very fortunate and I think blessed for your country that you've had a long period of conflict that's just come to an end. And I think for us, we look at the entire scenario and environment for investment is good. You've got a great country, you've got very hardworking people, you've got infrastructure that's coming in. So I think of the emerging countries, Myanmar is one that we looked at, Sri Lanka. So the ingredients and the structure and the environment we feel is correct for investment.
Do you think that the required stability is there here in Sri Lanka for your investment?
I think if you speak to investors globally, there are key ingredients that need to be in place before investors will come in. If you look at financial markets, you need free flows, you need clear guidelines. If you look at the areas which we are looking at, which is housing, definitely you need stability. That's number one. Then you look at the inherent infrastructure that's there, water, power, and so on and so forth, whether that will be put online. Then you look at the population at large, what are the needs and what are the wants of them. So I think clearly for any investor to go into any environment, you need, number one, very clear set of rules and regulations. It must be fair play, a fair playing field where you go in and there's not many roadblocks. And then throughout the investment period, it's like a football game. You don't want the rules to change. So investment is very much like sport. You need to have clear rules of the game. You need to have fair play. And you need for the entire period of that match or game, things not to change. So yes, continuity and stability are very, very important. Imagine a cricket match which suddenly the pitch changed in between. Not very nice. Imagine if rules changed. Then you wouldn't have the top teams playing. So investors like ourselves are the same. You need a fair playing field. You need to be able to look forward 3, 5, 10 years, depending on what type of investment you're looking in. So you don't want that investment environment to change. So certainly stability is very important, continuity of rules, very important for any investor in any sector.
So the required areas are very much looked after here in Sri Lanka?
I think we find that the Sri Lankan government policies are very much in tune with what international investors are looking for. I think they are very savvy. They know the type of environment which investors would want when they come in. Yes.
And the other area, what would be your specialization here in Sri Lanka? You said the real estate?
We see that there may be a role for us to play in terms of contributing in a small part towards nation building. And that is to roll out affordable housing. That's the area which we have been very good at. We've had a measure of success in Malaysia. Malaysia and Sri Lanka, the other thing is we've got so many things similar. We speak a common language. We had a common colonial past. So there are lots of similarities. Malaysia has been blessed since independence with relatively or no violence. And we had a very long, stable rule and continuous rule by the ruling government, which allowed industries, which allowed for investments to flourish mid-term and long-term. So we see a lot of parallels and similarities between Sri Lanka and Malaysia. And in fact, there are many Sri Lankans in Malaysia. So food is common. So it's not an unfamiliar territory to us. And in a sense, we can see Sri Lanka being where we were a little while ago, and we've moved forward. And I think now that you've unshackled yourselves from the very, very great burden of conflict, you're able then to forge forward. And we can see that both the physical infrastructure that's needed is being put in place. I mean, I've been coming here for the last 3 years, and I actually went on the airport highway on the night it was open. And that was, that was very, 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 I mean, I felt the pride of the nation then. And of course, as an investor who comes here regularly, it makes my travel time a lot more secure. So we've seen that. So we can see the government planning the required physical infrastructure. We've also seen through bodies like BOI and set up that the government is also thinking and also definitely putting in place very smart and savvy legal and financial frameworks. So infrastructure is not merely for an investor anyway, just the physical, it's the legal and it's the financial, and that's really in place. So that makes it very exciting, and we can see the potential. And for a growing country, you will definitely need housing, and that's an area we feel we can contribute, and an area we feel is growing also in affluence. And that mid sector, I think, is a lot of demand. And as I said, the physical infrastructure is being put in place so that you can have areas which are being opened up, which were never opened up before, and the regulatory framework is also there.
Okay, we'll talk about your investment and your project here in Sri Lanka a bit later on. Mr. Lim, next we'd like to know, do you think that the policies of the government, especially the government of Sri Lanka, and our economic strategies are very much in line with the global trends?
I think, as I said before, the regulatory frameworks that you have and the people which I've had the privilege to meet are definitely in tune with what's happening globally. So you've got very savvy, very people with experience in government and led by a very able leader who's got foresight. You need to have a vision, and I think, yes, we can see that, and that's slowly unfolding.
Right. With me is Mr. Lim on this edition of Hot Seat on Sri Lanka Live. You're with Hot Seat on Sri Lanka Live. With me is Mr. Patrick Lim, the Executive Chairman of Premier Asia Capital. Mr. Lim, next we'd like to know, for your investment here in Sri Lanka, why Hambantota? Why not any other part of the country?
Well, as I said, we're focused primarily on affordable housing. And we've had a measure of success in growing to brownfield areas or new areas rather than central cities and all that. And in Hambantota, number one, we can see a very well thought out master plan. That's very important. And as I said, from Malaysia, in a sense, when I come to Sri Lanka, it's like watching a movie that I've seen the end. So I have a measure of confidence, especially looking at what's being put in place, that what is planned will happen. So that's our confidence in the authorities that it will happen. So looking at the master plan that's been put in place is very well thought out. Infrastructure has already been put in place. There are ports, airports. So the key driving factors for economic growth are there. You've got the convention center, you've got hospitals. So a well thought out master plan, a new area, which relatively few players are there, which will, we believe, in not too distant future, realize the potential, the development and completion of this infrastructure which government will put in, we believe will happen. Once that happens, then you definitely will need housing. And that's where we have invested in this project with BOI, where for the initial phase, it's about 200 over units of apartments, about 800 square feet, 80 square meters.
What's the magnitude of the apartment? Will it be like the luxury apartment? Or?
No, it's actually mid-sector, but it's very nicely designed. So at this point in time, I think they are pricing it around 8 million rupees, which I think will be affordable. There'll be buyers, especially, as I said, with all the construction that's going on, with all the infrastructure that's coming in, with the completed facilities, people will need affordable homes. And that's a sector we target. Affordable but very good quality, and the way to design this is also designed within the mini master plan, where we have that as the economy grows and affluence grows, these apartments or condominiums will not lag behind. They are the right size, right design, that when people upgrade them, when people have more cars, there are the prerequisite parks, the design is nice, it's modern, it doesn't date. So we are excited by the project, and we see growth in Hambantota. We see demand for it. Definitely, it's fulfilling a market demand for that area.
What would be the value of the entire investment?
Our first phase, it's around 25 million US. It's not very large, but I think it will grow, and we're looking at subsequent phases that are coming in, including a commercial area, a duty-free area, where we bring in, again, facilities for this very much growing township, which is, again, very well planned. And once the facilities are done, people will need shopping centers, people will need food and beverage, people will need medical facilities, so on and so forth. So for those who've been overseas, I think, if you look at suburbs in UK, in Australia, basically your suburban housing and local retail will come up there. And we're very confident that this will happen, and we are very much committed to make it happen.
What's the completion time period?
We are looking at about 24 months typically for the, for the housing. That's a typical contract.
How many stages would be there for the entire project?
At this point in time, we're still finalizing the master plan. What we've secured with BOI is the residential portion, and then later on a small commercial precinct with duty-free, supermarket, food and beverage, retail, auto parts. So basically your local needs will come up, but built to a very international standard, and I believe something which any traveler who comes from any part of a developed country will say this is very much like home.
What would be your target audience?
Very much the local players there, local investors there, local consultants there, people who are coming there to reap the benefits and be part of the economic growth there. I think we feel that there's more than enough demand. In fact, we're anticipating that there'll be more demand that we can supply for the time being.
What would be the extent of your project, like, when it comes to the land area, the space given?
Right now, we are looking at an area of just under 50 acres. I'm not sure how many purchase. We work in acres, so that's what we're looking at. And I'm sure if we do well, we'll be hopefully given the opportunity to expand this area to do a little bit more.
Right, okay. And with that, we're going to move on to another break. Welcome back. You're watching Hot Seat on Sri Lanka Live. With me is the Chief Executive, the Chairman of Premier Asia Capital of Malaysia, Mr. Patrick Lim. Mr. Lim, next we'd like to talk about for Sri Lankans, especially the Western fora. There are a lot of criticisms being leveled against, especially on the human rights, the track record. How do you see this scenario affecting your investments in Sri Lanka?
Well, I think as an investor, we come to Sri Lanka, we came here about 3 years ago. And for us, it is from the point we look at a country and what's moving forward, I think that's important to us. We see that the government is very much in tune with delivering goods, services, and products which the people want. And we see very much that if this continues, there'll be a lot of benefit to the Sri Lankan people. And if we can play a role in that nation building, I think that's very positive for us. And I think that should be the focus for us anyway, the focus is from now and moving forward. And we see that it's a government which is delivering a lot of infrastructure, both physical and non-physical. And in our discussions with the government, they have the interests of the people in hand. And as corporate citizens, that's also important to us. So for us moving forward, when I speak to people overseas, I talk to them about our investments here, how we were collaborating with government to roll out developments, roll out businesses in an environment where we see very much that the government is very much in tune, very much taking care of, and the interests of the people are basically manifested in their policies, and that's important to us. I think issues which predate us are something which everybody will have a point of view, everybody will have a stand on. But as I said, for us as investors, if we were to go to a situation where we find that the environment is inequitable, the environment is oppressive, it's not also an area where we would not invest in, because eventually it will blow up. Eventually, things will not come to a very positive outcome. However, looking at Sri Lanka today and Sri Lanka moving forward, we feel very confident. And in discussions, as I said, our discussions with regulators, with government, with policymakers that we've had the privilege to discuss, we feel that they are very much in tune with international norms. We feel that trade practices and laws and regulations and implementations fair and equitable to the people, and we feel that you've got a government that has the people's interests at heart, and for an investor, that's very heartening. So for us, it's where we came, and then moving forward, are the prerequisite investment criteria, investment environment in place? We feel very much that that's the case. And in terms of working with government, I mean, when we look at our own project, size of project, the recreational facilities, standards and all that, those are basically international standards, and they are very much also in the area we're looking at is basically at the affordable market. So we feel that in the areas where we are working with government, government is practicing an international standard of delivery where it's fair and equitable, and that's important to us.
What's the assurance that you have the same, the concrete policies will be carried forward?
Well, we do hope that the government continues, and because if it does, then its ability to deliver will be enhanced. So we have a measure of confidence that there will be continuity. We hope that there will be continuity.
Right. Okay. And the other area that I want to like to focus on is the support that you'll be getting from the local authorities, and especially in helping out in all when it comes to the tax areas, even the investment areas, when bringing in investment to Sri Lanka. Do you think that the Sri Lankan workforce is on par with the international standards in catering to all the international requirements?
I have no doubt. I mean, Sri Lankans that I've met are as well-read and well-informed as anyone in the world, and the skill levels there are not lacking. Where and I think in terms of many of the industries, you surpass world standards. I understand that in terms of manufacturing of garments and other areas, Sri Lanka actually is the dominant player. So basically that tells you that you have a workforce that's well-read, well-educated, easily trained, and are motivated at this stage. So yeah, I think you can do anything that you want to do here. The question for an investor is the market here. So I think if I understand your question correctly, if somebody was to put an international global standard product and wanted to build a facility, I think you'd do it as well here as in the States or anywhere else. Now the question for the investor is, is Sri Lanka ready for a 7-star, so on and so on? Is the market ready for very, very high end? I think it needs to grow. Middle class needs to grow. You have time. But no, I think the marketplace is very international. The workforce is very international. The consumer is very international. We're on the net. We're on the net because you're very in tune and switched on. So I think, yeah, it's a global community here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Patrick Leib, the Executive Chairman of Premier Asia Capital, for talking to us in this edition of Hot Seat on Sri Lanka Live. With that, we wrap up this edition. Thank you very much.